Okay, we'll begin. I'll start with non-agenda item testimony. Julio Flores, Gabriel de Simone, Marquis Clanton, Hung Nguyen, and I believe Lisa Berlanga. Yes. Lisa, you want to talk on non-agenda item? Yes. Okay, great. So, Lisa, you might be the only one here, so yeah. Come on.
California Charter School Association. The non-agenda item I wanted to speak to is Prop 39. I just wanted to say thank you to board members and to district staff for all their continued work with the schools and the Prop 39 offers. Thanks to Mr. Stover for his work, and especially Roy McPhail and Jack Kirshner, who continue to work with charter schools to work out Prop 39 facility offers that are going to work for the schools. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Great. Okay, I think we'll move on then. So can we get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Ms. Jackson abstains from and we should actually rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. That enthusiastic beginning, Mr. Beiser.
That's how we start at my class.
Every morning.
Ready? Begin.
All right. Okay, let's go to item C1. So this is the charter renewal petition for the Einstein Middle School Superintendent.
Thank you, President Barrera. We have Moises Aguirre from the Charter Office who will introduce this, a renewal petition for 5 years for Einstein. Moises?
Good afternoon, members of the board, superintendent. This item is an action item for the renewal charter petition of Albert Einstein Academy Charter Middle School. The attached exhibits and board docs include the renewal charter and financial information. The charter petition has been reviewed by district staff, and the recommendation is to approve this charter for 5 years. The board does have the ability to deny the charter petition or approve with conditions. If the board elects to follow a denial, it would have to adopt findings. Einstein Middle Charter School met the academic requirements for renewal by obtaining an API score of 855, which reflected a 62-point increase in its base API of 793. The school serves a diverse student body that generally reflects the student demographics in the district, and the school has met AYP requirements last year and is not currently in program improvement. In terms of finances, the board report that is attached contains an analysis of the original budget that was submitted with the original charter and compares that to actual budget expenditures. It should be noted that the school did have an ending balance of $482,000 for the 2009-2010 school year.
Move approval.
Second. We've got 3 public speakers. We'll call up David Sharetta, Brian Diamond, and Rud Schofel.
Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Koba. I'm David Sharetta, middle school principal at Einstein. Just wanted to thank you for your support and collaboration these past 5 years. 5 years ago, I stood here and the initial charter was approved for the middle school, and then the next agenda item found out we didn't have a facility, and so from that smooth start, we've really built and a really good collaborative relationship with the district. I'd like to publicly acknowledge Moises and Susan for their support of kind of a neophyte in the charter renewal process, and me and my team. So thank you for that. I think it bears mentioning too that in addition to the points that Moises called out, we were recently accorded California Distinguished School status, and so we're extremely proud of that, and I have a great teaching staff and students who really are the ones who deserve those accolades. So by your approval vote today, you are authorizing excellence for the next 5 years at Einstein Middle and giving our students the opportunity to excel in an international environment where we emphasize critical thinking. and intellectual risk-taking. So thank you again for your support. We also have a number of staff members here today. I have Leslie Schreiner, our financial controller, should the board have any specific questions about the budget items here. So once again, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of the teachers and staff at Albert Einstein Academies. It's a teacher community that genuinely cares for our community, our students, and our campus. This is reflected through the many collaborative efforts that our teachers not only collaborate with the classroom through different disciplines, but also interdisciplinary, working throughout grade levels, providing a cohesive curriculum throughout 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. In these efforts, as a physical education teacher, it's very important to me, and it's very, very personal to me to be able to work with my colleagues in such a close environment, providing that balanced curriculum for all students. But beyond the classroom, the AEA staff is dedicated to providing opportunity of community service, after-school opportunities such as sports and the arts, and a thriving ASB program. The behavior support team, the community and service team, as well as developing programs are all valuable resources that our staff has collaborated with in the last 3 years where I've been a staff member at Albert Einstein, has seen our middle school become IB authorized, a California distinguished school, as mentioned previously, and significant increases in our API score. It's truly an inspiration to me to be a member of the team, staff, students, parents, and the community. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. And to the two of you I personally know, Richard and Scott, I am Rudd Schaffel, Einstein Academy's board member, and I am here today on behalf of the middle school. I come before you more to thank you for our success rather than to receive your congratulations. For it was your predecessors, of whom you are the worthy heirs, who brought us into existence. We tried diligently to meet the high expectations you have of us, and we want to gratefully thank you for the wisdom, courage, and innovation you have shown in first granting and now renewing our charter. We also want to thank your superintendent, Bill Koba, for his gracious letter to our principal, David Chiaretta, regarding our selection as a California Distinguished School. We wish to thank as well your charter coordinator, Moises Aguirre, and his capable staff who have wisely and patiently mentored us and who have carefully guided us through a thicket of requirements. Being here, I must tell you, feels a little like homecoming for me. For my mother, Marion Rudd, studied on this campus in the 1920s when it was San Diego Normal, a teacher's training college. She went on to inspire a generation of students. She would be happy to know that my love of education, which she instilled in me when I was a child, remains undiminished even after all these years. But isn't that what we're all about, those of us in education? For us, teaching is a calling, not a job. A sacred mission, really, to help all our students unlock their marvelous potential. So, as a recipient of an honorable award, how do we do it? We start with the marvelous potential of our students' parents, and we work hard to unlock their potential by getting them to join our own efforts. Like your own John Evans, who is a deep well of innovative ideas, we encourage our parents to participate in most educational and campus activities, and the results are stunning. Our parents report over 20,000 hours yearly of voluntary activities, with probably another 10,000 hours unreported. One school, 30,000 volunteer hours. Such generosity helps us live within our means. Their generosity not only helps our budget, freeing up more funds, for example, for employee pay and benefits, but their commitment to us expands their dedication to their own children. And you know what that means. Wherever parents become committed to helping their children succeed at school.
Thanks,
They become
Rod.
better students, a benefit not only to our students, but teachers too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rod. And Rod, you and the Einstein community are very deserving of our congratulations on your distinguished school award and just all the work that you've done. And if folks notice that David Sharetta looks a little physically drained, it's because he made a bet with his students last year that for every API point that the school would grow by, he would run a mile. And they gained 62 points. So I hope you're still walking, David. So we've got a motion and a second to renew the petition. Any further comment? If not, please vote. Great. Thank you, Einstein. Congratulations. Okay, we are now on to item C2, and this is the renewal petition for the King Chavez Preparatory Academy. Superintendent or Moises?
This item is an action item for the charter petition for the renewal of King Chavez Preparatory Academy Charter School. The attached exhibits and board docs include the renewal charter and financial information. The charter petition has been reviewed by district staff, and the recommendation is to conditionally approve this charter for 5 years. The board, again, does have the ability to deny the charter or approve without conditions. If the board elects to deny the petition, it would need to adopt board report as findings in support of any denial. Conditions are technical in nature in that staff is recommending for the language in the charter petition to be amended regarding mandated cost recovery and reporting district inquiries in terms of cost. King Chavez Prep met the academic requirements for renewal by obtaining an API score of 693, which reflected a 115-point increase in its API from a base of 578. There are some concerns with the school's current statewide decile ranking of 1 and similar schools ranking of 1, but again, it did meet and exceed the API growth target, which is a minimum requirement. The school serves a student body that generally reflects the student demographics in its geographic location, but not necessarily the district. The school did not meet AYP requirements last year, and it is currently in year 1 program improvement. Regarding finances, the board report that is attached contains an analysis of the original budget as was submitted with the charter and compares it to the actual budget expenditures. It should be noted that the school had an ending balance approximating $400,000 in the 2009-10 school year, and petitioners have representatives available also if there's questions of them. Thank you.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve?
Move approval with conditional.
Move the staff recommendation.
Right.
Okay. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a second. We've got some speakers. Angela Hubbs, Tim Wolf, and Jim Montgomery. Jim, do you want to speak to this issue if you're here? Okay. Thanks. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, board members and Superintendent Koba. My name is Angela Hubbs, and I'm the principal of King Chavez Preparatory Academy. I would like to start by thanking the board and administration for the hard work that you do on behalf of the children of San Diego, as well as for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of my school. I've worked at the Prep Academy for the past 4 years as a teacher, vice principal, and now as principal. As you know, last year, the Prep Academy was the most improved middle school in San Diego County with an API jump of 115 points. I have seen our school evolve over time and can say with confidence that the dramatic gains we made in API score last year are the result of systemic and integrated structures that will continue to propel the school towards future success, beginning with exiting program improvement. Our teachers have become data-driven and use consistent formative assessments in order to provide students with targeted instruction before, during, and after school. We also work within the professional learning community model in order to collaborate, analyze data, and maximize our resources to meet our students' needs. We have a strong school culture and climate and emphasize character development and college prep in order to motivate our students to work hard and rise to the challenges of a rigorous academic program. Our staff culture is healthy, proactive, and collaborative in nature, and we are unified by our firm belief that our students are the best and the brightest and are college-bound. We feel confident that we will continue on our trajectory of improvement, and it is our goal to ultimately become a California Distinguished School. In conclusion, I would like to say that it is my sincere hope that the Prep Academy will be granted a 5-year renewal of its charter. We take the work we do for our students very seriously and are committed to providing them with a high-quality education. Thank you for your continued support of all the King Chavez Public Schools.
Tim Wolf, Chief Executive Officer of King Chavez Schools. I'll be speaking for both the Excellence Academy and the Preparatory Academy. Thank you, board members, Superintendent Cuoba, staff members of San Diego Unified School District. I'd also like to recognize our supporters here today in the audience. Thank you all very much over the last 5 years and actually over the last 10 years for the support of the King Chavez Academy of Excellence and the Preparatory Academy. We are especially appreciative of the district for allowing us to be a part on the Memorial Campus for the King Chavez Academy of Excellence. In the areas of our schools where a high proportion of children live in poverty and under extraordinary circumstances of abuse, homelessness, violence, extended family care, we need to create educational partnerships between school professionals in order to do our vital work. The quality of those ties is directly linked to student and parent motivation and participation. The King Chavez Preparatory and Excellence Academy strive for excellence in academics, arts, and athletics. The Preparatory Academy, as Angela just said, grew 115 points last year. The Excellence Academy, 27 API points. We are proud of this success, but we will not be satisfied until our schools are all over 800, as is our primary academy and our athletics academy. Preparatory and Excellence plan to exit program improvement this coming year, and to that extent, we have added rigor in our data-driven, standards-based instruction, added new and exclusive ELL programs each day for students, provided extended day opportunities, added learning centers for response to intervention students, provided an extended professional development program, invited outside WASC reviewers, and continue to emphasize the culture of high expectations and skill for motivational success for students. King Chavez is a fiscally sound organization. In the midst of this crisis of state funding, King Chavez is growing, hiring new employees, increasing staff development opportunities, increasing technology access for students and parents, raising salaries in 2010-11 and plan to do again in 2012. We have not resorted to furlough days, have not increased class sizes, and have not laid off employees. We will be pleased to make the required changes to our petitions for the Excellence and Preparatory Academies regarding mandated cost recovery and responding to district inquiries as noted in the board report. In addition, we will change the number of students in the Excellence Petition to reflect the actual number of projected students to be consistent with the budget. These changes will be delivered to the Charter Office within this week. We welcome the district as a partner in our open and transparent administration and welcome the district's oversight of the accountability of our continued educational reform. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation on the King Chavez Preparatory Academy. Any further comment? Mr. Beiser?
Yeah, I have some very strong concerns about the Preparatory Academy. First of all, I'm very concerned that when compared to similar schools that look like this school, it doesn't stack up. It's a level 1. What that means is that if you were to take schools that look just like this school, almost every other school is doing better with the same kinds of children. The second concern is the decile 1. The third concern is they did not meet their AYP goals this year. The fourth concern is that in their CST testing, they only tested 25% of their students proficient in math and 29% of their students proficient in English language arts. Those proficiency and advanced pass rates are abysmal even for a school that looks like that in the current CST environment. The API of 693, while its growth has over the last year is something definitely to be commended, an API of 693 when compared to similar schools of this type, it just simply does not stack up. So I'm very, very concerned that when compared with similar schools, this school really has some challenges ahead of it for the future. But I do recognize that they are developing systemic structures of support for their children after school and during the school day. I also have to recognize the fact that they do, even if compared with similar schools, they are not performing as effectively as other schools. I do have to recognize and give them kudos for the API growth that they have. And I don't want to pull the carpet out from under them in light of the fact that they are headed in the right direction, albeit late. But better late than never. So for that reason, I will be voting to support the renewal of this charter school. However, I do hope that the staff, the board, and the educators and the parents at this particular school will buckle down and try to be more competitive when compared with similar schools. Thank you.
Mr. Beiser, Dr. Evans?
Yes, Mr. Aguirre, if you could come forward.
I think Dr. Evans is going to reach deep into his well of creativity.
Where that came from. Okay. This is a very deep question. Now, we've constantly been looking at the issues of criteria for approving charters, and there are basic minimum criteria and then other aspects we look at. And I understand that when you made your recommendation, it was that they did meet the minimum requirements.
Correct.
Yes. So could you just comment on the gap between what Mr. Beiser is talking about and the minimum statutory requirements?
Right. So some of that is we go into the report itself, but basically there's a series of there's 4 items where you in terms of criteria the state has developed for renewing a charter petition. It has to do with meeting API growth rates, it has to do with meeting your statewide decile rankings, and it has to do with meeting your similar schools decile rankings as well. It's not both and, it's an either or. So as long as they meet one of the criteria, they become eligible for renewal. Now the next part of the question you're trying to get at is more of a policy question. Mm-hmm. Is really does that mean you have to renew it? I believe the answer is no, but I'll probably have to defer to counsel on that. My understanding is that is a minimum requirement to be eligible for renewal. The API growth, the decile rankings, the similar school rankings.
So when you say the statewide decile ranking and the similar schools ranking, mm-hmm. is the state requirement that
how does being one of a similar school ranking, how does that meet the criteria?
Well, you can meet it by either achieving your API growth, which is what they have here in this particular case. They had 115-point growth in their API, and they met that criteria, so they become eligible for renewal. If they don't meet the API growth, then the next thing that we can look at is have they met their statewide decile ranking, and if they don't meet that, we can move on to have they met their similar school decile ranking. So again, there's a series of criteria that the state has developed to be eligible for renewal.
Okay, so then, and again, I understand too that they've made some great progress, and I'm not trying to take away from that at all. But in terms of not just being an automatic rubber stamp, I just want to direct the question to council. I know we've talked about this a lot, but Mr. Geary has said that they've met the minimum requirement, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the board needs to approve the petition. Could you comment on that, Mr. Shanky?
Microphone works. There it is. Obviously, the legislature has devolved upon you the authority to not approve a renewal. The minimum requirements are simply that, the minimum requirements. So if you don't approve a renewal, then we go into the whole issue of what happens to the school at that point. I'm not sure, I don't have the statute in front of me, but I'm sure there's a process about you would go through if you don't approve the renewal of when they would have to shut down. It's not like a revocation, which is in the middle of the term. It's a different process. But this is the authority you've been given to not approve the renewal. So.
Okay, from my memory, that seems other situations I recall, it was basically they had met the minimum requirements, and so therefore we didn't have grounds for disapproving.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah. So I just wanted to be careful about that.
Yeah, that would probably require a more in-depth legal analysis. But again, I just trying to make sure that we're aware that there's different criteria that have been developed, and that's what we usually work by. In addition, this particular school has implemented some structures that are newly in place. That again, we're interested in observing if they can continue to keep that type of API growth.
So maybe if you could, and I know that there are things in the report and you've already stated things, but as far as they've met the minimum requirements, as far as beyond that, why you as a staff are recommending approval, what's your... I think you've already stated, but I just want to make clear what is the reason why you're saying that.
Right. So my understanding is they implemented a position at the CMO level in order to work with curriculum and instruction. The person that actually had that position is Douglas Harrell. And when he was put into that position, he now works with all the King Chavez schools in order to work on having a standard way of approaching education and ensuring that there's a quality process in each school at the King Chavez. And they can probably tell you more about that, but again, that's our understanding that they have made some systemic changes that have allowed that type of growth, and we're interested to see if that can continue.
So your impression is that they've met the minimum requirements and they're also doing some positive things to continue moving in the right direction.
Right. Just to clarify my earlier remarks, of the three measures, the API growth, decile, and similar schools growth, they've only met one of those three standards. They fail abysmally on the other two. However, to just clarify my remarks, because they've shown such growth in the API category, I want to, and I'm also aware of some of the new changes that they've implemented to continue in the positive direction. I think that we ought to not pull the rug out from under them as they're, because I have the feeling that these kinds of educational changes take a few years before you start seeing the traction and the growth long term. And so that's why I will be supporting the renewal of the charter.
Just one question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe on renewals the board is restricted to a 5-year term?
That is correct.
Right.
Okay, without any further comments or questions, please vote. Okay, great. And Moises, do you want to just stay up for the King Chavez Academy of Excellence? Sorry.
Item C3 is action regarding the renewal of King Chavez Academy of Excellence. This is an action item for the charter petition renewal. The attached exhibits and board docs include renewal charter and financial information. Charter petition has been reviewed by district staff, and the recommendation again is to conditionally approve this charter for 5 years. The board again does have the ability to deny or approve without conditions. If the board elects to deny, findings would need to be adopted. The conditions are technical in nature. They're pretty much similar as the prep. The only thing that changes was to align the enrollment number in the charter petition itself with the budget, and it sounds like they've already addressed that. Again, King Chavez met the minimum requirements for renewal by reflecting a 27-point increase in API. And again, they have achieved a statewide decile ranking of 1 and a similar school ranking of 6. But again, it did meet the API growth target as discussed earlier. So given this, and regarding finances, the board report also includes attachments that contains an analysis of the original budget as was submitted with the actual budget expenditures. It should be noted the school had an ending balance approximating $100,000 during the 2009-2010 school year.
Can we get a motion?
I move to approve
the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. In a second? In a second. Okay, we've got one speaker, Adriana Diaz.
Good afternoon, President Barrera, board members, and Superintendent Coba. My name is Adriana Diaz, and I am the principal of King Chavez Academy of Excellence. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for your continued support over the last 10 years. I am grateful for the facility that you have provided our academy, and I am encouraged about working in collaboration with the district in the renovation of the Memorial Campus. In order to successfully exit program improvement, we have increased programs and resources for our staff and our students. We have added a learning center that serves 60% of our students with focused English language development, intervention, as well as guided reading and guided math. In addition, every student participates in 30 minutes of formal ELD instruction daily. New to us this year is our after-school program 5 days a week, which includes an hour of academic intervention every day. Our staff has a scheduled professional development and a professional learning community for collaboration weekly. Lastly, thanks to the I-21 and our mobile netbook carts, we have incorporated more technology in all of our classrooms. I would also like to highlight our outstanding color guard team, who in their first year of competition came home with 7 trophies, 5 of which were first place and were overall bronze medalists in the advanced division. Through programs like Color Guard, our students are learning skills such as teamwork, commitment, and responsibility. In 2010, we increased our API score by 27 points to an API of 713. Furthermore, I would like to emphasize that after 3 years of preparation, in March of 2010, our academy received a 6-year term of accreditation from the WAS Committee. The Academy of Excellence is committed in continuing to do great things for our students. I would like to thank you again for your service and support.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Mr. Beiser.
Yeah, I'd like to direct the board's attention to table number 8, where it shows their API was 718 4 years ago, and now it's at 713. So the school has had absolutely zero API growth over the last 4 years. In fact, it's gone down. Second, I'd like to direct the board's attention to table number 9, which shows the school ranking. 4 years ago, they were ranked at a 4. Every year they have gone down year on year. Last year they were ranked 1. This slide into oblivion is alarming. Also on table 9, the third thing I'd like to point out to the board is that if you look at the similar school ranking, 4 years ago they were a 10. Every year they slid down. Last year they were a 6. And if you look at Table 10, they did not make their AYP growth the last 3 years, but the first year they did. What this shows to me as an educator and a mathematician is a trend down year after year after year after year, 4 years in a row. This is incredibly alarming. What would we be doing with the district school if this was the performance of this school? The last thing that I think stood out to me in my mind that was a little bit concerning was that they only have, Moises, is it correct? You had said they only have $100,000 in reserves. Is that correct?
For this particular school, in this case it's part of a larger network of schools, which Dr. Wolf can probably address. They probably provide some supports, but for this particular school, that's our understanding in terms of ending year balance last year.
So this school has an ending year balance of only $100,000 in reserves. Thank you.
Mr. Bryant?
I think what Mr. Beiser is pointing out illustrates the challenges and the constraints we have under the Prop 39 and the Constitution, and why I think this board is moving in the direction of, before we approve charters in the first place, that we do everything we can to make sure there is the greatest likelihood of success, because we all want charters to be as successful as possible. And once they're approved, there's very little ability we have to influence that. And even on renewal, in reading the statutes, it sounds like our flexibility is fairly minimal on both those areas. The other aspect, of course, is ultimately parents vote with their feet. I mean, if the parents believe that the children that are going there have the education that their kids deserve or want, then they have that right and opportunity. And but it does not resolve the basic concerns from the district's point of view. And hopefully we can, but I think we're fairly constrained within the law at this point.
Not all parents can vote with their feet. Not all parents can afford the transportation costs to send their kids to other schools, or maybe there are other factors involved. Maybe they live in the community where that school is, and so it's much easier just to go to the school down the street.
Okay, any further comment or question? If not, please vote. Okay. Thank you, King Chavez. We'll now move on to a discussion, a first reading of the Downtown Library Charter School criteria. Superintendent?
Thank you, President Brewer. Some time ago, we addressed the board on the approach, the strategy for building a downtown library charter school decision-making framework. And the staff, in fact, went off to develop criteria. Today, what you have in front of you is a first reading, and if you walk yourself through the board docs, you'll note there are different topical areas, and I'd like to ask Moises if he would walk you through and identify the rationale, because we've tried to create a framework that is new and different, because this is a new and different situation for the board as a whole, where we are offering up a facility under construction. They are at the foundation, first floor, and a little bit beyond level now, and opening based on current construction schedules and discussion with the city for September of 2013. So, Moises, if you could come forward.
So the first thing I did want to share with everybody regarding this particular process is we brought a project team together that included staff from finance, instructional facilities, the district architect, legal services, and also included the local representative from CCSA in the development phase of the particular criteria and rubric that we're working with. We had a number of meetings where we requested feedback from everybody in terms of what would this particular project look like. At this point, what is before you is an RFP that includes a description of the application process, including the format, details such as number of copies, so that all applications can be submitted in a uniform format. And also all applicants understand that what the rubric is looking like at this point. It currently has 26 criteria that we will be reviewing. Again, it's only for first reading, and we will modify it based on public input. The way we approach this is from a strategic perspective. Charter schools are really comprised of three major components, which is the academic program, the governance and operations, and the finance. So with that in mind, that's kind of the framework we're working with. So we move forward to, as a team, develop criteria which seem most applicable, made sense in terms of what is something that we want to look at in terms of the academic program at a charter school. So we develop these set of criteria that includes how to best leverage the particular unique location that this will be cited at, the enrollment and the capacity of schools. And again, you can see the different criteria here, but that was the academic piece of the rubric. Moving on to governance and operations, we included issues such as local stakeholders, whether or not a charter included a democratically elected board. Again, it's not a requirement, but since this is unique, it could be something that could be afforded a different point system. Whether or not the charter school is going to be operated by a 501c3, types of partnerships that are being proposed. Again, a number of items here, governance and operations. On the operations side, it also does include some feedback that we have become aware of from public agencies. So we did try to address that as to the best of our abilities. And in finance, that's the third component. The third component included issues such as facility costs, ensuring that the charter operator that is selected can cover the rent and perhaps the operational costs and perhaps rent, that there's a significant fundraising development or an ability to do that. So again, the criteria encompasses three main components. As any charter school, that's what basically composes a charter school.
If I could, President Barrera, there's a timeline, a notional timeline in the very last section of the board docs, and I wanted to make one other comment. You're all aware that there was a recent grand jury report that was issued. All of this work was well underway, pretty close to a refined state. And regrettably, there was no contact with the grand jury. They would have known that this was a major part of our planning for this special or different charter program. And when we report back in July, we will clearly show them this rubric and all of the work that's gone into it. That's my additional comment.
Some questions.
We've got some public speakers that we'll call first. Lisa Berlanga, Mel Katz, Veronica Ortega, and Jay Hill.
Thank you, President Barrera. I do want to thank Moises Giri for reaching out to me and including me on the committee and having some opportunities for input. One thing which I told the committee and want to make public to the board is we do have a concern about the cost of the facility that's in the document. The school can hold 400 students at max. So a 400-student charter school is not large. The budget's about $3 million. I had Larry Tamayo, one of my colleagues from XED, who's here today, help me with some numbers. So for a typical 400-student charter school, their annual revenue is $3 million. So if the lease is $60,000 a month, that's 24% of their budget going towards the lease. If the lease is $160,000 a month, that's 64% of their budget. So numbers are not adding up and making a lot of sense. I know there's concerns for new charter schools, building a budget that's workable. There's only so much a 400-student charter school can do. Also in there under fiscal, it says they can have up to $1.9 million in reserve, so they have that lease payment for a year. Again, unrealistic numbers in the rubric that I am concerned about. There may be opportunities for SB 740 and facilities reimbursement funds. However, that's questionable because this isn't, although not owned by the district, it's leased by the district, so there's questions there. They may be able to get some reimbursement funds, they may not. That would have to be decided. Also, if this is now being paid for out of Prop S monies, I'm not sure why a charter school would have to reimburse the district under Prop S monies, although I'm not sure if it's redevelopment or Prop S at this point. A couple other things that showed up in this document since I last saw it are the charter proposed policy ideas that have not been worked through, have not been included as charter policy, but they are in this document already. and also the grand jury findings are in this document already. Not that the grand jury findings should not be addressed. They most certainly should, but I'm not sure how much control a charter school has over those, especially at this point when they haven't been approved and they aren't working with those who are building the school. I'm just not sure it all completely makes sense. So I would hope that there would be some work to this rubric so that everything in here is viable and doable and a charter school can commit to doing this and be successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
President Burr, school board members, I'm Mel Katz, and I am chair of the Library Foundation, and I'm also the chair of the new downtown charter high school, which was approved by you on November 3rd, but doesn't have a home yet. Did that look like a sympathetic look? I really, looking over the, want to comment on the rubric that Moises and his staff has put together. It really is an excellent rubric and has an excellent things that about this unique opportunity of having a charter high school in the new downtown library. I have 4 items that I want to talk about. Before I do, I'd like to introduce, though, 3 other members from our board. Joyce Gaddis from San Diego State University, Veronica Ortega from City College, and Laura Andrews, a parent with downtown students, and all are on our board. The first item that I want to talk about is the democratically elected board. This is a unique opportunity, and it's a partnership between the city, the San Diego School District, and the Library Foundation. I would love to recommend that whoever is the charter operator here have 2 board members from the school district, 2 board members from the city, 2 board members from the Library Foundation, and then those 6 choose 5 more board members for 11 board members. That way, it really plays into the unique partnership. My second item that I'd like to bring up is the item on the last page, and that is the rent and operational costs. If this was under, from what I understand, Prop 39, when you provide a facility, you would give reduced rents. Since this doesn't fall under Prop 39 and it's a lease space, you don't own the facility, I don't feel that there should be such exorbitant rents. There could be rents. If you took your $30 million investment over the 40-year lease, it would come to $62,500 a month in rent. I think that should be the amount, and if we could be getting reduced, that would be great. The third item I have is the first year of rent being in reserve. I just really feel that is an onerous amount of money, whether it be the $732,000 or the $1.9 million that a school have in reserve. The last item would be just a question to you, and that is, would this facility be open and a proposal be open for a school that doesn't have their charter yet? And if it does, are you opening up a precedent that you really don't want to open up? Should only people who currently have charters be able to give you a proposal for this new charter? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, President Barrera and members of the board. My name is Veronica Ortega. I am a founding member of the new charter, the Downtown Charter for Downtown Charter High School. I also wanted to address an item on the assignment rubric, and I also want to commend the staff for putting a rubric together. As a professor and often a grant reviewer, I have to do a lot of these, and I know how tedious they are and how thoughtful you have to be. I do want to address the item which has to do with enrollment and capacity, and it's on the first page. And that particular item suggests that the facility will receive at least 400 students within the first year of operation. And that is not part of the typical best practices when opening a new charter school. It is much more typical to bring in one cohort or one grade level at a time to to ease in that group into the new curriculum, and then for every subsequent group to really have a group of seniors that they follow as new high school students. Also keep in mind that it will be a brand new facility, not only for the students but also for the staff. And no matter how beautiful and well planned, there needs to be an opportunity to break in the facility and to use it in the most efficient way. So I would hope that you would reconsider that requirement and also consider the fact that if you hold to that requirement, it gives an advantage to existing charter schools that already have 400 students and a disadvantage to new charters that are developing their that will be developing their student population. And that by doing that, you might be losing the opportunity for a new charter that is doing exactly what you're asking, and that is thinking very carefully how to leverage that location to utilize the beautiful new library and also bring in the partnerships that it is uniquely developed for that space. So I would hope that you would consider a more staged approach to the enrollment to give a fair opportunity to all. Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Council President Barrera and Vice President Lee Evans and distinguished members and Superintendent Koba. My name is Jay Hill, and I am here on behalf of the City of San Diego Public Libraries and specifically Library Director Deborah Barrow, who regrets that she couldn't make it today. The library is excited to be engaged in this unique and innovative partnership with the school board and the city. And we thank and applaud you for your leadership and support of this groundbreaking and collaborative venture. From the very beginning, the charter high school was designed with safety in mind, and the school features its own separate dedicated entrance and lobby, separate elevator, stairwell, and security. Library patrons will not have access to the school and its students. However, the school's students will benefit from access to all the library's world-class resources, including a special homework center with unique resources to help students with projects, a teen center with special services designed to engage teen learners, a technology and learning center filled with computers, and in fact, the library will feature over 400 computers. Many, many more resources and services. We envision a dynamic board leading the school composed of 2 people appointed by you, the school board, 2 people appointed by the mayor and city council, and 2 people appointed by the Library Foundation who, as I said earlier, would appoint 5 additional community leaders. I'll finish with a quote from Jed Wallace, the president and CEO of the California Charter Schools Association, who says, "The Central Library Charter School will become a national model because of its innovative approach, stakeholder collaboration, and flexibility to meet student needs. The combined educational resources make a charter school within a central library a winning concept. The Central Library is a perfect opportunity to empower high school students to become the next generation of informed and active American citizens." Thank you.
Jay, thank you. And Laura Andrews.
Good afternoon, President Richard Barrera and board members. My name is Lori Andrews. I'm also one of the founders for the Downtown Charter School. I'm very excited and proud to be able to represent a very underserved community. I live right around the downtown library, and I just wanted to mention and address also the enrollment incapacity that's concerning to me. I know that in the petition we've mentioned that we want to start with one grade level at a time. I just want to mention and let you know I'm a mother of 3, and my kids are in the upper grades now. However, I have experienced, all different settings. I homeschooled my oldest. My middle child has special learning needs because of learning disabilities, so he goes to Crawford High, and then I have my youngest who goes to Preuss. And of course, I've seen different models. process also built on the foundation of starting one grade at a time, and I've noticed the significant difference that it created for the success of his current success in his own school. So I just want to, we know that a lot of the schools that have been successful have started with this foundation, and I just want to, express, how much I think that it would be a better structure. It's proven that it works better, and not necessarily say, oh, maybe we can fill it with more numbers, but more, what is our objective? Do we want successful people who are going to come back and contribute to our community, or do we just want to fill up space? So I think in the end, we're all in agreements that we really want successful leaders in our community. Also, I just want to make a comment, there's a lot of great recommendations, and we as community members already have a lot of barriers in place and lacking a lot of schools for a lot of different reasons, and I just encourage you to try to eliminate as many barriers as you can to make this possible. Thank you.
Dave, Mr. Barnett.
First of all, just a comment and then a suggestion. Right now, the board has Prop S allocates up to $20 million for a downtown school, and I think the board is committed to that. Beyond the $20 million, this board member, at least, is not committed to spending any more Prop S money on the downtown library, and I think redevelopment funds are the appropriate use for that. But on the item, the main issue before us, there's an item coming up on the agenda where, if the board approves it, developing an ad hoc committee to develop charter approval criteria, and it's dealing with a lot of the issues that we've dealt with in the last few months, and the board has tried to adjust new charter approvals based on that. I do appreciate the staff clearly listening to the different board feedback the last few months and including some of these ideas, but I think the purpose of that committee is to say that we're still open to looking at these criteria, and I would not want to have this charter proposal school be in concrete until that process has occurred. So what I ideally would propose, and if not, I have a lot of detailed recommendations on here, is that we move the timeline back. And the question is, could we move it as far as November of this year, even the first meeting in December of this year, because it will give us a chance for the Charter Review Committee, assuming the board approves it, to develop criteria for new charters, and then with some thought and thoughtfulness, and then this proposal would be consistent with that policy. If the board doesn't want it, so I guess I'd like to hear first, before I make a motion to that effect, whether or not it's feasible to move it then, or whether, given the needs of charter schools to apply and financing and all that. So I don't know.
Scott, it's a first reading today.
I understand, but the second reading is going to come back in May.
I think it's two different things, Scott. I don't mean to be interrupting you, but I think it's two different things. I think what we're looking at today is a plan for how we would place someone in the building that we have.
Right, I understand.
What you're speaking of, the review policy for new charters, does not affect this at all, unless there's some charters that are coming up that may want to participate. But that should not affect this particular timeline, because this timeline is because we wanted to make sure that we identified whatever school was going to go into that building. So I think that they're two different. We're not looking at approving any type of charter associated with this timeline that we're offering here today. But this item that we're offering here does not affect any charters at all. This is strictly a timeline replacement.
I understand. And what I'm saying is, I don't want this charter that goes in here to be significantly inconsistent with the new policy, if there is one, especially since this will be, if you will, our flagship charter for this district. So what I would recommend, unless staff says they can't do it, is that we put off this item until the end of the year. And the question is whether or not they can still meet the requirements, or whether that would be too strict. So I'd like to ask staff before making that motion.
My question then is that, are we going to ask any charter that wants to go in this facility to undergo the new whatever policies that we might develop.
Maybe let's take it one point at a time. So Mr. Barnett's question is around what are the implications of moving the timeline?
So there's really kind of two questions here. One is the assignment of space for a charter school at this particular facility. And
the question really I want to answer is if we move the deadline for this timeline for us to the end of this year, is that going to be problematic to us making a decision on choosing a charter, whatever criteria that is?
I think it may be more of an issue in terms of just the building itself, which I'll let Jim Watts address. In terms of the charter, so that impacts that when the charter has to be selected, everyone to get working on that particular building.
Yeah. So the answer is, and actually we had some discussion with the charter office earlier because they had proposed a longer timeline. We sort of pushed back and said, based on our schedule, we would prefer to get the charter identified early so they can start in the beginning of the design process. And roughly we're hoping to have, really obviously we want as much time from the tenant when the tenant improvements are ready to do that tenant improvement work to make sure we can hit a September 2013 opening. And so our current timeline is assuming, and we just have completed the architectural request for qualification, and that selection will be brought forward to the board. So it would be to keep on that schedule. The current timeline is optimum. I would say that there's certainly an option. If the board wishes, we could certainly bring the architect on and start developing more of a generic plan for the space, and then we would adjust that once the charter is selected. So we could pick up some time, but from our standpoint, the current timeline is what we feel is optimum to bring a charter and right at sort of the ground floor of the planning process and have them work with us all the way through to design development.
So basically right now you're proposing it will take about, once the board selects it under the current proposal in August, September of this year, then you'd have 2 years to build out the TIs, the tenant improvements.
Well, design, permit, and build that, yes.
So you'd have 2 years to do that, and the question, I would make a motion that we move this process back 90 days so that we have more time to analyze this process, and that still will give, I think, sufficient time to design and build out tenant improvements.
Okay, I just want to again clarify with our legal counsel. This is agendized as a first reading, so can we make motions and take actions on that today?
A first reading indicates that there would be no action today. It's simply a first reading. I mean, if if the board wanted to direct the staff to bring back changes at the second reading, they could do that.
We could make motions to direct staff to bring back changes.
Kind of the parameters of what we would like to see in the second reading, sure.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'd like, whether we need, is the timeline that's before us, is that when it be brought back, it be brought back to be delayed for 90 days?
That's your motion.
So
I think Scott's motion is allowable because what he's doing is he's making a motion to direct staff to bring back a change in the timeline.
Yeah, that's the purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, the first reading isn't, obviously, because it's a first and second reading, it's not in concrete.
Yeah.
If he's suggesting to make changes to come back to the second reading, the board can certainly vote on that, to direct staff to make those changes.
And my reason for making this motion is if we don't do that, then we need to go through today every single one of these rubrics, and I have detailed comments on all of them in order to modify it before the second reading, which staff right now is saying is going to be in May.
But that is the purpose of today's meeting, is to go through every single one of these.
So is there a second to my motion? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any discussion of Mr. Barnett's
motion? Yes, I'm trying to understand the reason for the delay. If the initial reason for the delay was because of the upcoming committee that will review the charter policies and procedures, I guess my question is that are we saying that this ad hoc committee will be formed, and then whatever recommendations they have for new charters and new charter renewals will affect the people that are going into this facility.
No, that wasn't in the motion. The motion only dealt with delaying this timeline by the 90 days. What the board does or doesn't do with the other agenda item is potentially relevant, but I have a lot of comments, and I believe we need more time and staff analysis than just one board meeting to deal with all the issues before here. So that's really my reason for the motion.
Okay, and again, well, then I raise concern because the purpose for us having the meeting today is exactly that. We provided these items so we could go through them and make individual comments per item, and that's the reason for a first read. And I try to get us to do that for everything. We didn't want to do that. But to take an additional 90 days, I think is excessive. So I'm very interested in hearing what you have to share now, because that's the purpose for today's
I intend to share it today. I just think we need more than a week for the staff to come back and make the changes that I'm going to be recommending.
That would affect my vote, depending upon what your changes are.
Dr. Evans? Yeah, I think one of the reasons that Mr. Barnett is bringing that up is that certainly we have charters that are already approved, and that's not going to change any charter that has been approved, whether it's for this facility or for another facility. However, there are certain items on here which I think the committee that he's talking about would be dealing with. I mean, one is the issue of the democratically elected board, what we're expecting from charters. So we may come up with certain guidelines about what we do and do not expect, and I think that's going to be based partly on our policy desires and also on legal issues, and we have to have that clearly defined. And so that's what we're doing as far as our general charter approach. So if we have one item on here that says, I'm just taking that one, 100% democratically elected board, and we have instituted that for the facility, but yet it's not instituted as a policy for charters in general, then we're getting some sort of conflict there. And so I think that's where the overlap is, and I think we want to do this very carefully. I mean, I have a lot of questions about some of the things on here too, but that's why I would support a delay in terms of allowing this committee to do its work and then looking at the criteria for the facility. I have a lot of questions about some of the details on here, but I'm not going to go into those yet either.
That motion, yeah, Mr. Weiser.
I think that Mr. Katz brought up some very good points also, particularly about maybe the one-year rent reserve needs to be something that...
Mr. Weiser, can we stick to the motion?
Sure. Yeah. And to the extent that there are comments or suggestions or recommendations, I think that it would behoove us to have the opportunity to deliberate over some of these concerns that have been raised, and make sure that we're developing and creating the best plan that we can for this for the downtown library.
Okay. The concern I have about the delaying the selection of the school that would occupy, one is the concerns that Jim is bringing up about being able to incorporate from the beginning the school in the design process. I also wonder, and maybe I'll ask Moises about the planning time that the charter operator would need, particularly if it's in any case, whether it's an existing school with an existing charter or a newly authorized charter that is yet to open. I wonder about the timing of needing to select a principal, needing to start recruitment of students, all that process.
Right. So the question is the type of that kind of depends on the charter school that ultimately is selected. If it's a brand new charter school, new schools usually need lead time to do exactly that: recruitment of staff, recruitment of students, all the things that you need to do in order to be able to operate a charter school. If it's a charter school that's already in operation, and there's some that have applied or have indicated that they will apply through the request for intent to apply, then they already probably have a lot of those things in place. So a lot of that will depend on the school that's selected. Again, if it's a new school, it probably does need more lead time. to recruit staff, make sure they have CDS code numbers from the state, and make sure that everything in terms of background clearances and all that type of material.
Just make sure it's clear. My motion was to move things 90 days. So right now the proposal is for the board to select the charter school at the library site August, September. So, everything would be moved 90 days. The board approved application deadline set of June. It would be September. So it's still all within this year.
Your motion is to push the entire timeline back 90 days, or simply the selection of the charter.
Well, I'm assuming the selection of charter affects the other items, although it may not. I mean, the staff may decide that they could still have them submit their financials by the dates subsequent. I mean, I don't know. But the main thing is to look at the review application to say that the criteria, instead of approving that today, we approve it in, July or August, June, July, I guess August or so. And so we have time to really make sure we make the right decision for, as I say, this flagship charter for our district. So,
can I ask, Moises, if we were to move the final approval of the rubric 90 days, could you compress the final selection of the charter, or do you think that would be rushing that?
Well, I just would like to make sure that the project team has enough time to go through the evaluation process, and if we need to have interviews, leave that flexibility for the district before we go through and make that recommendation.
Okay. Any further discussion of the motion?
Well, just in general, my understanding is we're looking at a 2-year time period, and that would be reduced to a 1-year, 9-month time period. And when you said, a certain amount of time is needed, it was never very specific. So for a new charter that is forming, and obviously existing is less, but typically 1 year, 9 months sounds like an adequate amount of time.
Right. Well, again, it depends. If it's a charter school that's operating right now, they can probably just take their program and move it.
Okay, well, but I guess what would you say would just be a reasonable amount of time, advanced time for a new charter school to prepare?
And I think in my experience, I can say that once a charter is approved, it depends on the level of understanding of the charter operators, but usually a good year for planning purposes is helpful. Sometimes charters are actually approved, and they take that first year to plan to be able to ensure that they have sufficient facilities. In this case, it probably is a moot point, to make sure that they have the CDS code number so they can ensure funding, to make sure they have opportunities to recruit staff and recruit students, and that by the time they open, they have everything in place. So it's usually a year after a charter's approved.
So typically a year. And the two proposals here are either a year, 9 months, or 2 years.
I think there's something else here, though. I think the rationale behind this is more facilities agreement.
More facilities.
And I think that's the key factor that Mr. Watts was trying to refer to. As they start designing those floors, the charter that we put in there, they want them to be part of that. And they're looking at starting that in September. And if we have not selected a charter by that time, then what I think Mr. Watts said is that they have the architect do a general something or other. And so I don't think this is because of a new charter. I think this is having to do more with facilities than anything else.
Yeah, that's really, and of course there are a couple of variables here. We don't know how the city's going to do in terms of the library construction. They could always run into some hiccup, but the latest I've heard is they're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. So, we would like to be positioned for the tenant improvements to begin as early as next summer if the building's ready for that. And when you back that up through the design process, and for this project we will be going through the city permitting process, which probably will be quicker than going through the state architect, but still takes a certain amount of time.
How much time?
Now, having said that, we're certainly willing to, we can work within some parameters with a schedule, and we can speed some things up. And again, we're just trying to optimize the success of the project, and from our end, from the facilities end, it's better to have to get everybody on to the table as soon as you can to start thrashing through the issues. But I wouldn't stand here today and say it's just absolutely impossible if there's a 90-day delay. But obviously, sooner is better from our standpoint.
And I guess the other question I would have, and Moises, I don't know if you have a sense of this, are there any funding deadlines that the school, grants that they might be going after that we would jeopardize if we delayed the selection in 90 days?
Well, since the school's not going to open for a couple of years, the most important part for school funding is having a CDS code prior to opening, and I think the school, whatever school ends up going there, would be okay in terms of CDS funding. In terms of grants, usually there's some reimbursement grants from the state, but those, my understanding is so this year you get paid for last year's facility. It's a reimbursement program, so it really trails the actual cost. Then you submit your receipts to state, and then they provide the reimbursement. So in terms of grants or funding, I'm not aware that it would impact it severely at this point.
Okay. Without any further comments or questions, let's vote on the motion. Okay, the motion fails. Okay.
Specifics?
Yes, please.
Number 1, on page... Sorry, I mixed up my numbers on the pages here. It's 2 of 2. Sorry. Is the first one finance?
That's the third
one. Okay. First one's academic program?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on the enrollment capacity. I think we should be open to that, depending on what it depends. If it's an existing charter, obviously, then that won't be a problem. If it isn't, then I think we just need to look at the proposals that way. Obviously, if they have less students, there's less ability to pay as much rent too, and it affects that later, but I'm going to address that separately. But I'd rather be flexible and not necessarily award more or less points based on that, just kind of take it into consideration in the proposal.
And is that's getting also at the issue that a school might want to phase in?
Right, yeah. So right now it says they will ideally maximize 400 at the first year of operation, and as a 0.4 and 1 point saying they don't maximize it. Well, I'd suggest we not weight that one way or the other, and any of these that I raise, if staff has some specific objection, please.
The only idea there was in terms of funding. If you open up at full capacity, then it means your ADA is higher, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Yeah, and I'm not making that decision to indicate I have any sense of what school I want. I just would like us to have the most flexibility in making a decision.
I'm sensing consensus around this.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Did you go?
Supporting that, this is a 72,000 square foot facility.
Right.
We typically have our students housed at about 145 square feet per student. Looking at it on a square footage basis, it would seem to me that there's potential that this school could house up to 500 students based on the 72,000 gross square feet. At 400, it's 180 square feet per student, and that's wide open spaces. So I just would ask you to consider that as well.
Okay.
I did not have another one on this page, except right now we had talked about on the one that says demonstrated success. This only applies if school is operational. Mm-hmm. Well, we have discussed in our previous charter approval specifically, we mentioned that the operators of the schools or who the headmaster would be would have some record of success if it's a new charter. So since we are dealing with this issue now, I guess I'd like to have some language that would deal with new charters and not just old ones, which is consistent with the action the board took on approving Girard last time. And I don't want to set that language today, but since it's the first reading, that's an issue.
The basic notion that we want to see, if it's a charter that is yet to open, we want to see some significant experience with the principal.
Or the school leader.
Yeah, the school leader, yeah.
Yeah, we all agree on that.
Yeah.
I did not have any other on that page unless someone else wanted to add any more on that page.
No, not that page.
Is the next one governance or finance?
Governance.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, I did on this one. I wanted the local geographic preference. So one of the issues that I hope the downtown school addresses is to give options to people who, like Ms. Andrews, who live in the community. And there's a lack of high school options right now for people who live in the community. So I guess I'm not seeing the language here, how that's addressed, because we talk about academic program will be strongly correlated to downtown San Diego resources. So is that getting at this issue of trying to provide some preference for families who live in the
right? So that's one of the things we were trying to that's what we're trying to address in a way that allows us to work within the confines of what we can work with. So, for example, charter schools are required to provide a preference for in-district students, but at the same time they can enroll from pretty much throughout the state. So this was our way of trying to give us some way of ensuring that we can look at a charter petition and see if they're in some way, again, maximizing resources. Maybe we need to make it specific to students. Given the confines that we have, it has to be...
I think the language, and I know that you're trying to stay within the confines of what we're allowed to do, but I think the word resources is so vague that I think it would be hard for people to understand what that is getting at.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll talk perhaps students residing within kind of the general vicinity of downtown without giving them a specific preference, because the preference is district-wide.
Yeah.
Let me just, a related question to that, which is... I guess, would a conversion charter also be eligible for this? I mean, because in terms of addressing the students who are in the downtown area. I mean, and I don't have any.
I think there's
specific ideas. But for example, the nearby high schools, one part of it wanted to form a charter or something. Would they be eligible to apply on that basis? Because a conversion charter. You can give preference to local students.
Right, but conversion is also, as my understanding, is specific to a school site. So by definition, there is no school site here, so it's not a conversion.
Conversion is only as if at that site.
That's
not
right.
Not just the entity or the school ID number.
Right, so if you take a district school and if they want to convert it, it's specific to the site, is my understanding.
I'm just trying to bend the rules.
That's why you have that preference.
Deep in the well.
Under governance and local stakeholders, there's two items. There's local stakeholders, and then there's a, quote, democratically elected board. And once again, I appreciate staff trying to reflect the discussions we've had, but as we know, part of the challenges especially with new charters, is if they set up a 501c3, they have a requirement for three a president, a treasurer, and a secretary, I think. And that's what they have to do to form. What the whole purpose of, I think, Ms. Pereira and I, when I brought that forward earlier, was to say, is there a way we can up front encourage charters to be more democratic in choosing that? I guess I'd like to make both of those more general, and although I appreciate what the one of the charters said about saying they wanted us to have 2 members from the foundation, 2 from the city, and 2 from San Diego Unified. I don't want to commit to that at this point, and so I guess I'd rather have the local stakeholder proposal identifies how governing board will comprise of San Diego residents, and proposal includes a description of commitment to having a 100% democratically elected board, be more general and to deal with the both legal and some of the concerns that have been raised by the charter community. Mr.
Bartlett, so would basically, there's the one issue of starting up and then what there is in the long run, right? So even the proposal that was mentioned today about a couple from the district or the city or whatever might be an example of a way to start, but maybe we would want to see a commitment that once it's established that there would be more of a democratic process, and we're talking about democratic process that is school-oriented. In terms of the parents, and maybe some community members, but more focused on the school, that democratic process. So there might be. So the whole point would be you might set up something initially, but we'd want to see some commitment that after a certain period of time that would open up to a democratic school process.
I agree, and that's what I'd say. I'd rather have it more general instead of specific, and then let the proposals come in and suggest how they're going to deal with that concept.
I agree with that. Ms. Jackson?
Yes, I agree, because we have to be very careful. And I think it is sometimes shameful for people to start up a charter, and starting a charter is not easy work. It's a very difficult process. And if you take the initiative to start a process, to form the board, to get the people, to convince the people to start a charter, and then you turn around 2 years later and this board says, well, now we want people in the school to elect a democratically elected board, the people that they may elect didn't put out the sweat and blood and tears, and I'm telling you, I've seen some of these people start these charters, and it's not just that you send something in somewhere and it's done. It's some 16-hour, days for a long period of time. So I think the language should be very general, and how they would, keep that process, that mindset. But I don't want us to, to go the other way either. Okay, I know we have to make sure that the boards are working, but I don't want us to go to a process that people can really, really spend a lot of time developing something, and someone else can convince a group of people and take it away from them. Okay. Thank you.
President Barrera, I heard from both board members about keeping it general. Are the verbiage here general enough?
No, because it's specifically the local stakeholders are. No, if you're scoring it from 4 to 1, 4 is very specific. Will be comprised of, and then number of the Democratic elected said will a commitment to having 100% Democratic elected board. I think we're saying we don't want to be that specific. That's what I'm saying, at least under this.
Okay. I didn't know if that was pretty general to me. I don't know if you will work on some different words. We're just saying, committed to democratic process.
Well, it doesn't say that. It says commitment to having 100% democratically elected board. I don't.
So just as a clarification, perhaps, so with maybe if we remove the percentage specifically, would that address it?
You're looking for latitude for some hybrid mix.
Yeah, I want to have them be creative in suggesting it, and I'd rather not, which is wondering why I want to do this today, would wordsmith the specifics today, then come back with the changed language, and if it's that's my just.
Does the staff have some clarity in how to work?
I think I understand it now. 100% democratically, okay, it means that there could be not using 100% means there could be a hybrid. Maybe it's 60% elected and 40% appointed. Yeah. That's where you're going. I just wanted to make sure.
That's right.
I did not have comments on the ones, except I did want to make a comment on the school safety, indigents, and school safety child predators, unless anyone had any comments on the other items that are before those.
Under governance and operations?
Well, we're on,
correct.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
And I appreciate staff's comments about that there was consideration clearly in all our proposed schools for safety of children and so forth, but this does seem like it's replying specifically to the grand jury report, which I'll say in 30 years of looking at grand jury reports is one of the most ignorant and foolishly conceived reports I've ever read, but you don't have to put that in your response if you don't want. That's one board member's proposal. We have issue right now. Kids go to public libraries. They go off-site to go to libraries. Sometimes they're monitored by the school. Sometimes they're not. When they leave high school, they go to the library. My kids go from. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have, but a proposal includes a comprehensive plan to keep students and indigents separated at the library school. I just think for both of these, we need to know. Yes, we want to make sure that the children are safe and secure, but I don't think we want to overly focus that there is a problem.
Yeah,
because there isn't. I don't believe it's any more problem than it is for pretty much most other public schools. In fact, there's probably less in some ways.
I agree.
Here.
We've got a 3,000 student high school within blocks of this location. We've got early middle college. I frankly think I agree with Mr. Barnett's comments. It's an ignorant commentary on the downtown area. Frankly.
So the words indigence and child predator that applies to all of our schools, and adding that in there implies that somehow the downtown library is different.
So I guess what I'm looking for is we want to make sure there's a comprehensive public safety plan dealing with the safety of our students as there would be at any school, and not just target these areas which I think will create more fear than, and that would be my suggestion.
Yeah.
And it's covered in school safety entrances.
Right.
Only approved visitors are allowed to enter the school.
Right.
So just to simply strike these two.
So I think the easiest way is a compliant, authorized safety plan for the school.
Yes. Yeah.
And we'll go from there. And by the way, from initial concept, safety was discussed well before any reports, and we already had a commitment from the city for separate entry exit for the school students, just to give them a clean throughput without having to
and Mr. Hill addressed that as well. So yeah. I guess making that more general language that the superintendent says will make it clear. I did not have any comments on the back page there on the additional items that were on the back of that section before we get to finance, unless any other board member had any.
Doesn't look like it.
No.
Okay.
This is working well.
Okay. Rent and operational costs. I think we need to. I think there needs to be maybe a little absolute clarification of what this animal is and isn't, and that's number one. And there's been questions raised. Well, if we use Prop S funds, if we don't use Prop S funds, if we use general funds, is it Prop 39? Isn't? So, I think maybe getting a more detailed legal clarification, and obviously the district would like to have as much flexibility in that, I believe, as possible. Obviously, if we can charge some rent to recoup a $30 million investment, that'd be good. I don't believe we should be this specific. I believe that in some cases we're saying we're pushing a lot of potential charters out of the market.
Right.
Here is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I can't. So I'd like to have. I'd like to have more flexibility in the rent language. I'm open to charging rent, but we don't want, if there's a really great charter school, and we're excited about, and we don't want, because this rent is prohibitive, for them not be able to do it. So, is that general?
I have a mixed mind about this, and it kind of depends on what principle we're basing it, because one way to base it is to say we have made this investment, specifically the district funds, for a charter facility, and so on that basis we would want to recoup the funds. Okay, and it's not an existing facility that through Prop 39 that we're giving to a charter and so forth. So that makes sense on the one hand to me. On the other hand, I also have concerns about what Ms. Berlanga brought up. If this is somewhere between 24% and 64% of a typical charter school's budget, then we are essentially eliminating a lot of charter schools. I think the only ones that would be left would be ones that have pretty generous outside funding, that we're not trying to operate within the funds given them by the state, which would be a smaller pool.
Now, one thing we did suggest, which we didn't formally approve, but we did talk about, and that's part of what the policy will be, that if an existing charter school comes in and they're paying X dollars a month, and they transfer, like we're looking at some schools, that the rent not be higher than they're currently paying, potentially, if they still are having the same ADA and the same funds. But I'd rather not be that specific now. I'd rather, once again, I believe this needs a lot more thought than we can occur at this moment. So I guess I'd like to have maybe some more brainstorming and thought on the different permutations, and let's see the proposals. Maybe some will say they're going to pay full rent. We'll say great, and others will say we won't. But I'm concerned about weighing the fact that they can pay rent as being a weighted benefit, because the decision to a passport approve this, we are committed to spend the money on it, and so I just think it's unrealistic to say we can make up the entire investment just from rent as a major criteria. So does that?
Yeah, this is not a small school. 72,000 square feet is larger than our average school, as they currently exist. The rent of $61,000 a month is only 84 cents a month. It's 84 cents a month per square foot.
Right.
Per square foot.
Right.
The very, very, very minimal custodial maintenance, other kind of costs, insurances that they'll have to pay, we calculate about 70 cents a month. So the low range of this does not enable us to recoup any costs. They will pay, all of us that have reviewed this, in our opinion, they will pay to someone 70 cents a month at a minimum per square foot to operate their facility. So our low rent's about 84 cents. The high rent that we have in here is $2.22 a square foot, and that would cover the basic cost and allow some recouping of costs. But the low rate range, they're going to spend one way or the other, we would estimate.
I think first of all, it sounds like we've got consensus among the board of not wanting to disadvantage certain charter operators because they're unable to pay a certain level of rent. I would include in that the item of kind of the initial deposit that a school would have to come up with. I think it does come back to as Dr. Evans said, what's the principle here? I believe what we're doing is making an investment in public school options and access for families in San Diego, and then ideally within the district, and more ideally within the area. As we all know, if it wasn't for the Field Act requirements, I don't think we would be opening this school as a charter school. Period. I think we would be opening this as a district-run school. So, and again, I don't make a distinction between a district-run school and a charter school in terms of making sure that the school has the resources it needs to provide a good program for the kids. And if we're eating into those resources excessively because of the rent, or the initial amount of money that they'd have to have in the bank, then that concerns me. Phil, what you're bringing up I think is an interesting point, because what I understand the rent covering is the use of the space. The actual custodial work or ongoing maintenance I think would be on top of this, that we would be expecting a school to cover, either by having an arrangement with the district where we go in and provide those services under some cost to the school, or the school finds those services.
Sure. The category is rent and operational costs.
Okay.
So the concept is that the school will pay this to someone.
Okay.
Whether they hire their own custodians, whether we provide the custodians, maintenance, insurance, those kinds of things they will provide, maybe even taxes. I'm not clear on that. But so it's rent and operational cost. We're estimating for them to be at a low end, $61,000 a month, regardless of who they pay it to.
Are we required in the lease to pay the city for those operating costs? It's just the $10 million, right?
No,
we don't have to pay them any operation.
Is there not lease? I mean, in the lease, there's some expectation. The words may be there to prorate the district and/or the occupant for our fair share of utilities, custodial, and I think common areas.
Yeah, I was going to say along the lines of what Phil was saying, that sort of low, that $61,000 was not a rent recovery. That was really the cost of utilities, custodial, and this dates back, by the way, to a 2009 analysis that was done when we were initially negotiating for the lease, whether it was going to be a lease or a purchase, and we hired an outside consultant to look at that. And they assumed, for example, about 7 cents a square foot for custodial. I mean, not actually as big a number as I would have thought, but there is what's called common area maintenance that we that are responsible, or the operator will be responsible for the common areas of the library and some of the grounds.
So beyond the $10 million, the 20 and the 10, the $30 million, of which 10 is tenant improvements and 20 is rent, I guess. In that rent, on top of that, it's essentially a triple net rent.
Correct.
We, as
exactly. That is exactly
tenant,
what it
have
is.
to pay utilities, common area maintenance.
Correct.
But it's unusual to have us, the tenant, pay internal custodial. So as you're saying, this would cover to the site. It would be general site custodial or maintenance.
If I can clarify, it was not anticipated that the operator or the district would pay the city for custodial of those 2 floors. But they calculated that cost. As Phil said, somebody's got to pay.
But if we gave them the site at zero rent, and we said you can have it, they're still going to have to hire someone to clean the classrooms and take out the trash and
they will not avoid these costs that we're talking in the low end. Yes,
right. And we could, in theory, as part of it, say to them, well, you're going to have to cover the electricity costs and the water costs as to the charter, I guess. And you're saying, see, that's where I'm not sure where the $61,000 comes. If it includes internal custodial, what's our additional out-of-pocket of water, utilities, and common area maintenance?
That's all included in that number. That
in the
$61,000 includes, common area maintenance, an estimate of utility. And I should say, these are all estimates at this point, too. The actual common area maintenance cost will need to be negotiated with the city as we get closer. But this is the best knowledge we have right now.
So on top of the $10 million, $20-30 million, we are committed to pay the triple net costs, but not committed to pay the internal maintenance, just the building maintenance, electricity, water, landscaping, whatever common area, security, whatever's in triple net.
That's
Is that correct?
That's
so
correct.
That's a figure that we do we. The problem is we need more data on this. I mean, we can't...
Maybe break those out.
There really is virtually no rent in that lower number. Correct. It is almost entirely operational cost. When you get up to $2.22 per square foot, which is the high end, that's where you're covering those costs and actually charging them rent.
Could I ask one other question? I can't remember the other sublet provisions, but do we have to use the whole 72,000 square foot for a charter or school, or could we use 60,000 square foot and rent the rest out at market rates for a site which will probably pay $2 a square foot for a law office or whatever in that site?
There are provisions in the lease for other than a school use. I mean, it's subject to approval of the city, but we have some flexibility built into the lease for that.
Because if we're saying the space, we want the school to fill the space, and if the charter school only needs 300 or 400, the question is, because we are looking not only the $30 million we're spending on this, but now additional costs that we are going to have to pay on an annual basis.
I guess the question there would also be about the use of PropS funds, would it not? I mean, we've got what's in the lease, but could we use PropS funds to lease a space that we're then putting a law?
Well, that'd be a question I'd defer to our legal counsel.
Well, without an answer today, these are some of the issues that I would like to have more understanding of before we finalize this, and so you have, a week or two to...
And just basically having, like we said, having the breakdown, because when Ms. Berlanga was referring to the rent and the percentage and so forth, there's this other factor that we're talking about, which is actually custodial, insurance, and so forth. So that's not really rent. So if that's broken down...
So I think the understanding is we're not going to punish those schools who cannot meet this rent at this point, but also for us to get an understanding what our actual requirements are versus common area versus internal rent, and then also what our options might be with the rest of the site if we wanted to look at other options as far as the square footage, if we wanted to limit the square footage to 60,000 square feet.
I think also along the lines of not creating an environment where it's cost prohibitive. I think if you take a look at the last criterion, first year rent of reserves, I think that a lot of people have raised some very good points there that we really need to examine that because we're going to basically be shutting the door on a lot of very potentially positive charter opportunities.
Yeah, that one I was going to address as well, but are we done with the rent and operational costs, or do we have an understanding? Does staff have an understanding?
Superintendent.
I think we have a good understanding of sorting this all out. And I want to sustain what Phil pointed out. This is rent and operational costs. So wherever a charter school goes, whether it be on our property or in a private entity, there will always be what I call annual maintenance or facility use operating costs, such as utilities, custodial, and if this were a grounded space, there'd be even landscaping involved. So we understand. We'll work on this area, and I think it's a good conversation.
The next one, fundraising development, they weight once again a school of higher rate if they have a stronger fundraising plan, development plan, versus does not reflect a fundraising development plan. I mean, to me, the theory behind charters is that the school can get ADA from the state and that they should be able to operate a school successfully within that ADA, and that they shouldn't be required to have rich donors or other type of fundraising. So I think I certainly want to look at that, but I don't believe it should be weighed against those who.
I think really the question is financial viability. Can the school pay its bills?
That's essentially what the thought process was.
So I would not want to weight the fundraising development one unless anyone disagrees. And then the last now is the financial reserve here. Is that more? Is the 3% more than, or is that what's required, or is it 2%?
Under the MOU, it's either 3% or $50,000, whichever is greater for reserves. Right. But again, this is something outside of a traditional charter program, so we're trying to ensure viability.
And I think as we said on the other charters, we do want to look at, this is a different animal because we want them to be successful, and part of the success may be paying rent, but so I would rather have that first year rent issue. I want to look at it, but this is a different animal than a charter going out and renting a space in the neighborhood, because we may decide to charge no rent or just cover the cost of the overhead. So
it sounds like we've got consensus that we're applying the same principle here, that we don't want to disadvantage schools because they can't come up with a reserve of this amount.
Okay, that's all I have for now. But once we get the back, so what's the plan? The plan to bring this back is in the end of May.
That's what we're hoping for. Once we're opportunity for public feedback and board feedback, going back and working with the project team on a pretty quick turnaround to get you a second reading, and hopefully actions we can keep on the timeline, which is pretty aggressive. But again, it's mostly on the construction side that's impacting it, not so much the charter side.
Just the last one, Mel Katz raised a question about being open to a school that has yet, as of today, I guess, have an approved charter. I think that, where are we in terms of, how many schools to date have submitted intent to apply?
We received 6, and they're all currently operating charter schools within San Diego Unified.
Okay.
Well, not all.
Right, they're all approved.
Currently
authorized charters.
Currently authorized charters.
They're all approved, but they're all...
And they're also all in operation
currently, except for one?
Except for one.
Okay.
Do those include both middle and high schools?
Include middle, high schools, and also some K-8s that want to expand their programs. So it runs the gamut in terms of...
What's the lowest grade that's allowed to operate?
It's a middle and high school program. So if they're running a K-8 program, what they've expressed to us is they'd like to amend their charters to include a middle and a high school program that would be placed at.
So sixth graders would be allowed to attend this school?
I'm not sure if it's a grade requirement or an age requirement. Okay. So I can look into the specific requirement, but it has to be a middle school or high school program.
Okay. So why are below middle school prohibited? Is it the board policy?
It's a California building code.
Oh, they floors
up. Yeah.
Yeah, third grade.
Yeah. Because middle school kids have a harder,
more likely to
survive the fall. So I think we're probably covered because I can't anticipate a school coming forward to us between now and August, getting a charter approved and then applying for this. I mean, do you anticipate that?
It would be fairly unique at this point. Again, that's why we did the interest request for us to be able to gauge some type of feeling. At this point, we think it's a doable number of charter schools, and again, all the ones that submitted an interest, they were all authorized currently, and most of them are operating already.
Yeah. Okay. Any further comments on this? All right. Thanks, Moises. Thanks very much. Let's move on to item D1.
Can I put D1 and D2 together and move both of them?
Second.
Yeah, and I'll just make one amendment to D1, just a clarification. If you look at the second paragraph here, it says includes district staff, including area superintendents from districts with a large number of charter schools. I think we mean that includes areas within our district with a large number of charter schools. We're not talking about asking people from other school districts to. Yeah.
Correct.
So if we could just change that language. Areas. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we've got a motion, a second, and we've got two speakers. Okay. So this is on item D1. So we've got Lisa Berlanga and Cindy Dowdy.
Thank you, Board President Barrera. We are glad that board members are willing to continue discussion. So there were some proposed ideas out there. We're glad that we've decided to work together as a charter community in the district to talk through everything and think through thoughtfully everything. I think it becomes very evident even in today's meeting that a need for policy is there. There's concerns from board members about academic achievement and other things, and all these things can be addressed and talked through and worked on in charter policy. You talked about, what can the board do? Well, if the board has a policy in place that's transparent and that everybody knows is there and these are the expectations set, then it's a whole different thing rather than coming to a meeting every time and different ideas being thrown out. It feels like a moving target to those of us that are out in the charter community. We do want to make sure that within the policy that autonomy and uniqueness of charter schools is preserved. We aren't meant to run like a district. We are charter schools. We are autonomous. We are independent, and we want to make sure we keep it that way. We have a policy that I think everybody has, an old policy that was developed that was a great collaborative process between the charter community and district staff. Mary Bixby, who's in the room, was part of that. They actually had a board retreat or a retreat that charter people and district people went to together and created a really good policy that served us well for several years. So we have a starting point to work with. I do want to offer CCSA assistance, be happy to help in any way that we can in developing these policies. And I do have a letter that I want to give everyone that Jed Wallace, our CEO and president of the California Charter Schools Association, drafted on the specific points that were proposed charter school policy. And I know we've had some discussions with you on those specific issues, but he drafted a letter to address those.
Thanks, Lisa. And Cindy, are you still here? Yeah.
I've been up here more in the last couple months than I have in the last couple years. I just wanted to say, again, thank you for proposing a collaborative process on this. Since the charter policy was written and then revoked, we've been doing a lot of work with the charter office. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the last 4 years I've been on the district charter advisory committee, and we have developed a number of really powerful policies in a collaborative manner. A couple of the policies that we have developed have been the Charter Accountability Policy, the Charter MOU, the Charter Special Ed Document, and a Multi-Year Facilities Use Agreement. And these conversations have not been without vigorous debate, but we always operated very respectfully and came out with products that both the district felt met their needs to hold charter schools accountable, and that charter schools felt met their needs to have the autonomy. I have learned over my last 4 years as a representative on this committee is that all charters are very different. They range from 501c3s to arm of the district charters, from elementary classrooms to high school classrooms to K-12 schools. They range from independent study to classroom-based. They range from charter schools with 100 students to charter schools with over 2,000 students. They range from single charters to charter CMOs, from college-ready to credit recovery, from dual immersion to bilingual to project-based to international baccalaureate. And each charter school has its own unique needs. All the documents that we have developed over the last 4 years take into account the unique needs of charter schools by having provisions for flexibility within the documents. For example, the Charter Accountability Document has an opportunity for charters to do a charter-specific goal that goes to their charter. The Charter MOU has both arm of the district and independent charters, as well as multiple choice points throughout the charter. And the Charter Special Ed Document has 3 different choices for charters as well. So in collaboratively developing the documents, we have never applied a one-size-fits-all policy, and I think that's the reason they have been so successful. So I urge you to have a committee that is comprised of people that are very aware of the need for flexibility in charters and not try to apply a one-size-fits-all answer to the charter policy. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Cindy. Okay, we've got a motion.
Just one comment. I think the purpose of this is if we want charters to be successful. We want to be successful academically and financially. It's part of the Constitution, and they're public school kids, and the purpose is to, as much as possible, be successful, see where we as a board can actually impact that while maintaining the individual personality and flexibility. So that's the intent of this, and hopefully that will happen. Thanks.
Please vote. Okay, and I cut off earlier Jim Montgomery, because I know, is Jim still here, or is he gone? Okay, if not, we are adjourned. Thank you.